Okay, so today we're gonna finish, I guess, the Life of Proclus. I was
Mhm.
left thinking last class about this thing that we agreed on. It's like, well, he's much more impressive as a philosopher than as like a seer.
Mhm.
And I mean, that of course just might reflect on Proclus as on Proclus' specific abilities and specific talents, and he just wasn't a prophet. But um, it does occur to me that there might be a case to be made for something like philosophy starting from miracles. That as philosophers we should be more interested in miracles than in arguments. It's just that the miracles of Proclus aren't very impressive.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, I think that's like how Proclus would see it in some sense that, as you were saying, so like the miracles are supposed to be like starting points for what makes the world understandable in the first place, right? And there, it's the pronoia of the gods, them, establishing what's good and what's true, and causing rain to fall isn't that impressive. But if you think that, for instance, oh, I don't know, like um something like the poetry of Homer is also inspired activity. It's all supposed to be miraculous. And so and what's narrated in the poetry of Homer and Hesiod. And that for Proclus does constitute in some sense, like a starting point. He takes these as, starting points of for his thought, and these are authorities, and he works with them. So it would seem that maybe the problem is just that Proclus is not a very impressive miracle worker.
Hmm.
Um,
And because of Socrates' conditions of how crazy you have to be a good poet.
yeah, yes, I guess. Um, let's um let's go back. So we're at 33, I believe. And so yeah, so 33 is about some more um more gods that loved him, and then he'll round off the thing about his perfect virtue in 34. 35 gives us the birth chart, and I taught the whole class about that. And then we get his death in 36, and 36 to 37, 38 he closes. So let's do that.
We're at 33.
Yeah.
Okay. So 33. But just about the first previous thing, there's also like the idea that arguments can be a revelation, or we had that
Right. There's
Plato
also
as a
that. There's that. Yeah, yeah. That arguments can be revealed. That's true. That also, and I think that's like part of the reason why Proclus is a philosopher. I mean, not just because he had dreams about philosophy, and Athena told him study philosophy, but also because in his religious tradition, there's something divine about philosophers, and these divine signs testify to that.
right. So you could say like something like there's different prophets or different miracle people who are good at different parts of the thing. Like maybe one person is good at bringing rain and the other person is good at the opposite or something. And there's one person that is good at making arguments and is therefore not necessarily as good at other things.
Sure. Although, I mean, we can say that in general about talents in general, that you're good at one thing and not others. I just don't want us to say that. I mean, I don't think Proclus himself thought of his own, rational capabilities as anyway miraculous, and I don't think he was received like that by his successors, by
Hmm.
the other Platonists.
I mean,
Maybe
it's
I think people might have thought this way maybe about Plotinus, maybe about Iamblichus, because
hmm.
they get this epithet theos, right? They're called the divine Plotinus, the divine Iamblichus. Like Plato is called divine, and and I think there might be something like that also that people like because it's Plotinus and Iamblichus, it might also be like, wow, they just have these high flying claims sometimes, and we don't really know where they get them from.
Okay. But
But
that's like saying that bad philosophy or something that seems like not fully argued from the beginning to the end is
yeah, well, because I think it was like it's both things. It's right. It's not that it's like people think it's true, but it's kind of like poetry, and so you actually have to do the philosophical work of figuring it out. Yeah.
but
Uh,
there's still a difference between poetry and something like Plotinus, where something like, let's say, Spinoza has a claim that all the prophets only see like visions which are imaginary, and Jesus was the only prophet who saw the essence of God and therefore couldn't explain it or something like that. Like there's something like that.
um, there's something like that. You mean that Plotinus is like Jesus here?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
the philosophical vision of.
No, yeah, definitely, definitely. I'm just saying something like in terms of the genre of text. That's what I was talking
Hmm.
about. Um,
Right.
okay.
Okay. No, you could also always say like in order to be a philosopher, like as good at making arguments and distinctions and creative stuff like Proclus, you have to be born with a lot of talent, and those talents are somehow gifts. They're not. It's not like you created them.
Right, right. And Marinus certainly shows points it like that. But I think there's like a difference in quality and just this kind of these kinds of talents and making rain or writing the Odyssey. Right.
Hmm. Okay, so then we go to 33.
Hmm.
But if in this manner I opted to run through everything, to tell of his friendship with Pan, the son of Hermes, and the great grace and salvation that he received from the god in Athens, or to divulge the magnitude of the good fortune that was allotted him by the mother of the gods, which is, I don't know.
I mean, Cybele, the
Oh, okay.
um, who had the eunuch priests.
Okay. Which gave him cause for extreme boasting and jubilation. I might seem to my readers to be babbling, and even to some to be saying things unworthy of belief. For many and extraordinary were the things that the goddess did or said for his benefit every day. And because they were so numerous and unforeseen, I now possess no connected memory of them that I could write down. Hmm. But if anyone desires to see what an adept he was in this, let him take in his hand Proclus' book on the rights of the mother. So there's a book apparently.
Yeah.
Um, there he will see that he was not without divine possession, that he expounded the whole theology pertaining to the goddess, and in a philosophical manner disclosed the other things that are mythically related to her and Attis.
Right.
Um,
Attis was her consort who castrated himself, and that's why the priests were castrated as well.
okay. So that the ear is no longer troubled by the inarticulate lamentations and the other things that are secretly communicated there.
Right. So this stuff about the inarticulate lamentations. So the cult of the Great Mother was a Phrygian cult, a foreign cult to Rome, but that arrived at Rome at an early date, and but it was always seen as something rather non-Roman and something Oriental and bizarre. And they had these very ecstatic cults where celebrations where the priests would castrate themselves and they'd cut themselves and they'd use the blood in the rites and they would use symbols and sit and shouting. So it was very, very weird. That's part of this, the inarticulate lamentations. The Neoplatonists, I think we have comments on this from Damascus. And oh, and we also have a whole hymn by Julian about the mother of the gods. And they associated this whole thing with castration with separation from generation, right? Attis is actually mentioned in one of Proclus's hymns. He's mentioned in the hymn to the sun as one of the sun's identities. But the so the general idea is that this is a cult somehow about, separating yourself from generation, from therefore from pleasures and things, and joining and leading a purified contemplative life. Um, Again, this is, you see, he's doing this stuff about saying, oh, there's so much I could say that it wouldn't fit, just general praise. It's interesting, this stuff of that he says not only that it was numerous, but that it was unforeseen, and that I now possess no connected memory of them. That is a curious claim, and it points to something about how these benefits, or whatever the mother of the gods did, it wasn't some, it didn't tie itself into a long narrative, right? So it wasn't something with beginning, middle, and end that he could tell, oh, the goddess helped Proclus with this. It was just some kind of constant advantages or good things that happened to him because of her. Unfortunately, we don't have this
Mhm.
text that he mentions, the book about the rights of the mother. And um, again, and you see that, he also mentioned this connection with Pan, but he doesn't really explain it. Anyway, he just seems to be rushing um, uh, to finish up the subject. Yeah.
Hmm. Right. Okay. Okay. Let's move on. 34. But now, and there's some like things that people knew or something, I don't know. But now, as I'm running through the operations and blessing that arose from his theurgic virtue, and I've shown throughout my narrative that the man was equally furnished with all the virtues to a degree that men have never seen in a long time. Let us now put to an end our account of him. My beginning has proved to be not only a beginning, not even as the proverb has it, half of the whole, like the proverb that says the beginning is half of the whole. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So like starting
Aristotle
something is,
quotes it sometimes, yeah. They
yeah,
have some quotes.
yeah,
Yeah.
Plato, Amicus, yeah. So like starting is
Okay.
half the job.
Hmm. But actually, the whole thing is in its entirety. Four. I think Aristotle says something like I think the beginning is more than half of the whole or something, because beginning for him means like principles.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I think there's that play here too, right? Yeah.
um, Four. I began with his happiness, and passing through that as an intermediary, we have returned to it again, having presented. I'm not sure what we began with. I don't remember. Having presented in our
So
account the God. Yeah.
yeah, so again, I mean, he began mentioning Proclus how happy Proclus was, but then he started, with his happy birth and things like that. The I think the point here about is, again, it's arche. It was the principle that guided the whole. I try and show how happy he was.
Mhm. Um,
Oh, I mean, also more trivially, he gave the title to the text of unhappiness.
right. Oh, okay. Um, Four. So we've turned to it again, having presented in our account the goods vouchsafed to the righteous man from the gods and from providence as a whole, describing auditory and visual manifestations, so things that he heard and saw, together with the healings and all their other acts of guardianship, and also what fate and fortune dispensed to him, namely his fatherland, parents, and natural soundness of body, congenial teachers, and all his other assets. The presentation has shown that both in magnitude and in brilliance, these surpass those found in others, and furthermore have enumerated the excellences that spring from his own volition and not from any external factor, for such were the attainments of his soul and in keeping with his comprehensive virtue. In a word, I have demonstrated that the activity of his soul proceeded according to the perfect virtue, like, yeah, the ethics definition of happiness,
Exactly.
sufficiently furnished as it was with all the other goods, both human and divine. So, like Aristotle said, you need both money and divine is actually something that Aristotle sort of denies that you need, but okay. Um, and in a completed span of life, which is also a Aristotelian thing.
Right. Then the completed span of life here has an extra thing because he was prophesied is exactly how many years he was going to live, right? So and he
Hmm.
completed those 70 years. And yeah, the and divine is also of course, a Neoplatonic edition. But yeah, he wants to show that Proclus is the most happy person. And we saw also how, for instance, even the things that come from fortune, like um, homeland and parents and uh, um, natural constitution, these are natural virtues for him, especially stuff about his being, naturally healthy and beautiful and things like
Hmm.
that. Um, for 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 Marinus, and so this kind of underlines how yeah. Also, as Platonists, like this theory of virtue, it takes up the Aristotelian idea that, it's not enough for you to just be virtuous, right? For you to be totally happy, you need everything. And also like shows also the connection of theurgy with this, right? Because the idea is that in order for you to be happy in all these ways, and also in exterior ways, you're going to need the cooperation of the gods, right? The gods have to be good
Hmm.
to you. And therefore you also have to, your ultimate goal is to act together with the gods. That's like the highest virtue. It's some kind of like friendship with the gods, like the one that we talked about just now with the mother of the gods. That it's a casual thing that she's constantly helping him.
Hmm.
Right?
There's something here interesting where like there's the attempt to show that Proclus had like the complete all the kinds of virtues needed. He says like was not seen in a long time. It reminds me of like you see in like hagiographies of only very specific people like the Arizal, or where you get this like attempt to show like he was everything. He was both very pious and very smart and knew all the laws and all the Talmud and everything else. And besides that, he was this great Kabbalist. Because there's like this, and it's always less convincing because usually people are like good at one thing and it's very hard. Like always sounds like, yeah, although that wasn't his main thing, he was busy with one thing his whole life, but really he was great at everything else. Also, just we didn't have time to write down the classes on that or something like that. And but it's like comes from this like view that you need to be complete. Like you shouldn't like it would be unbalanced or incomplete if someone like knows only one part of the knowledge or like all the sciences. It happens to be we only have like real fragments of like he might have once read a book about a different science than the one he taught, but like that's
Yeah,
the
yeah, that's a good point. Like here, of course, like where he seems to push things a bit is um is in and he makes a point of it, right? Is in presenting Proclus as really engaged in political virtue. Where and there, of course, however, it's interesting, like he doesn't tell us that he wrote books about it or anything. But he says, ah no, but he was a counselor to Archidas, and he taught Archidas how to do these things. And so that seems to be like a way where he's trying to make the picture more complete than it was. The Because otherwise, him is, you know, from what we can tell, yeah, he was really engaged a lot in theurgy, and also he wrote hymns and he wrote the text that we lost, and also lots in, commenting Plato and so on, and even other things. We have lots of mathematical texts from him. Lots, I mean, not that many. We have the commentary on Euclid and the exposition of astronomical problems, but we know he also like wrote on eclipses and things. So um, it seems like it's not so much extending to all the things of knowledge, but of course there's this extension of all the virtues. I um, and I mean there are previous examples of like there's the classic case of Thales, right? So, he predicted when there would be a good crop, and then he cornered the market and became very rich. And so it's like a counterexample to the philosopher who falls to the other story of Thales is the philosopher who falls in the well in the Theaetetus. So there are also these things. And I guess part of the model for this kind of story of he knew everything is Aristotle, right? Because he just wrote about so many different things and things like that. And but but yeah, there's I also find this interesting, this claim that in a long time, right? In and I think it's the Greek is entoi makroi chronoi. So it's in the great time. It seems like ever. It's not just like since for a long, it's like ever. It's like the happiest person ever point.
Hmm.
Um, so that's it is a pretty strong claim. Um, and I mean, Damascus doesn't make this, of course. Damascus does really respect Proclus as an authority and as a general good man, but then he's like doesn't give him 100% marks. He has that quip about he cared more about theurgy than virtue.
Hmm.
Which I think is not so much about him being not virtuous, but more about his choice of like the choice of people. Wasn't a good judge of character in that sense.
Hmm.
Um, but um, but yeah, and in the beginning of the book, he made a very similar claim as well, that he was like the happiest man that we've ever heard about. Um, and let me, uh, right, yeah, that's in paragraph 2. Um, I think um, I think that he was the happiest of man in and here it says in the last times in recent times. So yeah, that's I guess that's kind of curious that you're praising this, Proclus as an example of happiness and of a complete life at a time when the empire is becoming more and more Christian and pagan life is becoming more and more restricted. And maybe that's part of the context. Maybe that's part of the context of saying you might, oh, and that might be part of emphasizing Prox's political activity. You might think that we're all restricted here, that being a pagan philosopher means that you have limited opportunities and that you can't really participate in society because, for instance, we can't work in government anymore and things like that. And like the name Proclus, right? He was born away from home. Why was he born away from home? One of the theories is that his father had to leave Constantinople because of new policies against employing pagans. So pagans are being pushed out of the center of political power, and you might think, that's a problem if you think that that political virtue is a central part of happiness. And then part of this saying, no, look, our guy who just died, he lived the happiest life, the most complete life, right? And so we can still do this. So maybe that's part of the emphasis on how he was simply the happiest person ever.
Hmm. We
Um,
could say that we get like, I mean, if the question is like, was Proclus the greatest man? That's one question, but another question is like that you have like the very like full chart of like what a complete man is supposed to be, and then he's trying to fill out the chart with this example of Proclus. But there is like a lot on
right,
this. Like we see what it would mean to be the greatest, most happiest man, or is what it takes, which is a lot.
right. And it's also, I mean, that's part of the reason why we're reading this, because we want to just see
Hmm.
their picture of the perfect man. And uh and I mean, certain that that's like that's what structured his account, right? How he told the story.
Hmm.
He just had all these slots to fill, right? He needs these virtues, and then we're going to fill them out. I mean, I mean, it's likely that he believed all this too, but the point is that this was the arche, as he put it, of his whole speech. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's interesting also that again, like they don't go the so this isn't how Porphyry presents Plotinus, right? Porphyry presents Plotinus, of course, as the person, as this great teacher, and who, who had a god as a daimon, and who, after his death, like his destiny after his death, is really important to Porphyry, and he writes it as a right. He writes the Life of Plotinus as a preface to the works of Plotinus, the Enneads. And he starts off the Life of Plotinus by saying it's impossible to give a picture of this man. He didn't want to give you a picture of this man. But nonetheless, he goes and gives us one in writing. And in a sense, all the Enneads together are a picture of him in writing, right? And so it's really about this teacher and making him available to you. Here it is. Whereas, and it's not so much about like presenting him as a model of virtue. We've seen this in some sense in what, in a way that Marinus also indicates that this is not a model human being, right? He wanted to die, right? Once he says this, and so he wanted to not be human. He wanted to be something greater than human, and um, but here there's this whole emphasis on happiness, which isn't so much present there. So like in the sickness at the end of their lives appears in both cases, but in the case of in Proclus, there's all this talk about how the gods were there for him and how this reflected his own desire to die. And whereas for Porphyry, it's much more gruesome how the description I think of like the how he was sick, and it's uh it's less soft in the sense that there aren't these other elements, and it's more, I'm off to a better thing. So there's also less the idea that you should have a complete life and be happy also with the external goods in the life of Linus. Whereas here, the idea of external goods is much more important. Um, and right. So the 35, I mean,
Yeah, it's that's
oh,
but that's
oh,
because of like Aristotle's like push for that, in contrast to like what you get in simple reading of Socrates, where it doesn't really care about any of that.
yeah, and I think it has to do also with this renewed importance. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I think it has to do with the renewed importance of theurgy and of the goodness of the world more explicitly. Yeah, in the
Hmm.
later tradition. So in 35. we can. I'll. I'll just. You can just read the first paragraph. You can don't
Okay.
need to read the sign and everything.
So 35. But so that the more erudite may be able to conjecture from the configuration of stars under which he was born, that the choice dispensed to him did not fall among the last, nor even among any in the middle, but among the first, they have set their positions out as they were at his birth. And we get a
Right.
chart.
And then we get a chart, and there are problems about these numbers. They don't really match. Um, so especially that the Mercury is far too distant from the sun, and and also the preceding conjunction doesn't make sense. But so I mean, I did that whole class about this, so I'm not going to go repeat that. The interesting thing here again is that he's the emphasizing that he was happy in everything, even in his birth. This thing about that the choice dispensed to him did not fall among the last or among the middle, but among the first. That's from the myth of because in Proclus' interpretation of the myth of what you're choosing is really your birth chart. He says this that you're choosing your rising sign, and you pick your and the lots are like who gets to pick first, and then who gets to pick second and picks the third. There's lots that are distributed. And however, Proclus also says, that the lots are distributed, but he doesn't say that they're just, but he argues that they can't possibly at random because if it was really random, it would be unjust, it would be unfair. And so he does think that it corresponds to your virtue in your previous life. So if you are among the first to choose, that means that your previous life was also very good.
Mm.
And that is Marinus is implicitly telling us not only was this, did this life go well, the previous life also went very well, was also very virtuous. Um, and it's interesting also to one thing that bears repeating is that he gave us a whole narrative of the life. Part of the function of a natal chart in antiquity was to also narrate a person's life, divide it into chapters and subchapters. So it's as if at the end he's giving us a different narrative, right, that we can then compare.
Mm.
And I tried to start doing that in that class. So why don't we go to
Okay, so
36?
let's move to the next thing.
Yeah.
Um, he died 36. He died in the 124th year since the reign of the Emperor Julian. Hmm.
Right.
Is that
So
a
you
normal way of
don't.
counting years? Be
That's a
like
normal way if
since
you're a pagan and you don't want
like
to
because Julian was
right,
the last emperor or
was
something.
the last pagan emperor, yeah. And there were often like
Hmm.
conspiracies or rumors about how someone else was going to do it and they were going to restore the empire again. Damascus talks about a bit about these rumors. So there was a thing. It's not a coincidence that you date it from Julian.
Hmm. Interesting. Like the normal way would just count to the current emperor.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
And not only that, you'll see that he gives a couple of different ways of dating it.
okay. Oh, when Nicagoras, the younger was Archon of Athens. Um, that's a year or a month.
Right. That gives us a year, and so there are new archons every year. So that gives us also a year in which it happened. And this
Okay.
is typical of like an ancient biography. You give two or more ways of dating something. Right.
Okay. On the 17th of the Athenian month of Municion,
Right.
I don't know what that
Makes
is.
sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, which is also the 17th of the Roman April.
Right. right? Fourth month of the year.
Okay. Um, where am I? And this body was ju judged worthy of the rights according to the ancestral custom of the Athenians, and as he himself had prescribed while still alive. I don't know what the customs are.
Right. Read on. It's an interesting passage.
Okay. For to this blessed man, if to anyone belong knowledge and solicitude concerning what is done for the departed. For there was no occasion on which he neglected their customary rites, but every year on certain appointed days he visited the places of the Attic heroes, the tombs of the philosophers, and of others who had become his own friends or acquaintances, paying the customary honors, not through an intermediary, which was an option, but in his own person. And after he performed the rites for each, he returned to his academy, and in a certain place he severally propitiated the souls of his ancestors and other kindred kinds.
Right.
And again, in another part, so another place, like in the academy, he made a
Mhm.
common libation to the souls of all past philosophers. And after all this paragon of holiness marked out a third place where he made offerings to the souls of all the departed.
Um, okay, so let's stop here. So what's interesting is that he maintained all these different funeral rites, and it seems that he has so on certain days he would um, go and visit the tombs of the heroes and the philosophers and the people he knew, right, who had passed away in Athens. And then he would go back to the academy, and then in one place he would propitiate the souls of his ancestors and people of his family. And then he would go one for all the philosophers, and then one for all the departed. Now, there's a puzzle here about what what does taking care of tombs and what does taking care of ancestors mean if we have transmigration of souls, right? I think I may have mentioned this in previous class.
Hmm.
Because part of the idea of taking care of the tomb and doing rites at the tomb is that the person is there at the tomb. And but if the soul transmigrates, they could be somewhere else. They could be right next to you. They could be you. Um, so how do connect these two things? It's unclear. I actually just was answering a question about this earlier today. Um, so I think that for Proclus, in a sense, probably like the Proclus thinks that there are daimones that are proper to each city and also proper to each genus. So each clan. I think maybe worshiping the ancestors is worshiping this worshiping, venerating, whatever. Um, is paying attention and doing a rite to this family daimon, right? That might be a way to explain it. And
Hmm.
um, because an individual human personality like Proclus is in some sense, it doesn't exist past the death of that human being for Proclus. Because what continues is the immortal soul, which was also the same immortal soul as that of Nicomachus, right? So what are who are you paying attention to when you're, doing a rite for Proclus after he's dead? Could you be, oh, maybe you rephrase it and you say it's the soul of Proclus. So it's the soul of, it's that soul that belongs to the planet Mercury, right? And wherever it is. So, it's unclear exactly what the theory behind these rites was, but it's important precisely because it's unclear. It's important that he clearly practiced these things, right?
Hmm.
And we know that he talks about heroes as well. And he talks about heroes in his work, right? Sometimes he divides daimones into three, right? Into heroes, daimones proper, and angels, messengers. And heroes, there was hero worship goes along a long way back in Greece. But they're here because they always get chthonic worship. So heroes are together with underworld gods like Pluto and things, and they have like separate rites that have to do with like pouring wine under um, um, uh, into the ground, and you do it at night and things, as opposed to the and it's like a different set of um, rites from those that you do, for instance, to the Olympian gods, right? And and it's interesting. And like for with regard to heroes, we know that he has, as it were, a non-standard theory. So it's impossible for Proclus, for instance, for you to take the idea that, oh, it's literally a human being who is born of a god and a human and a mortal. That that just doesn't, or that it's a human being that after death joins the gods. No, the orders of being are too strictly separated for that. So he thinks that they are daimonists, so they were never actually human beings, right? They're a special kind of daimon, and I mean, it's not so important to go into the details of that now, but what's interesting for us is something that he has a kind of like reinterpretation of those, right? So he doesn't take them and those myths. So he doesn't take them at face value. And so he could have had something similar for ancestors, right? He could have said it's actually the daimon of the Geonos or something like that. Um,
Mhm.
and all this stuff about his interment. We'll get to his own burials soon after that. But I mean, this reflects also stuff like in Aristotle that, having a good death and being well buried and having a good reputation after death is also part of being happy, right? So that's, uh, and then you wonder if there's
Um,
something, if there's like a correspondence here of like, he mentions like he did libations for the philosophers before him. Implication: we philosophers after him should continue to do this.
mhm.
Okay.
So
You're
I
gonna ask.
think, what am I gonna ask? No, I think the like something like the Kabbalistic theory to solve the problem of transmigration with graves and things would work to get with the like cutting up the soul into so many levels and like say something like it's whichever part is actually specific to this life is the one in which is in your tomb or something. And it's true that it's not the full, not even the most important part, like it's the least important part. Uh, that Rizal has like practices that are meant to uh, bring back the higher levels of soul into the tomb, so it should be worth something. So I don't
Uh,
know, like because of his theory is like only the last, like the last, what do you call it? The last garment, right? The last, uh, how do you call it?
right,
I forgot
yeah.
what practice calls them. Body is in the soul and is in the grave, and then, but since he wants to like talk with the person or have something to do with his like higher level, so he has like this kavanot or whatever it is to get that in. Um,
Right. I mean, you could say so, like in a sense, the lowest part, but the thing is, like, the lowest garment is the physical body. Of course, the physical body doesn't last that long once you've buried them, and especially
Well,
not if you
some
burn them.
some parts of it last, and like you get some bones or something that can last more or less for I don't know forever,
Yeah,
forever in human terms.
yeah,
Like we still have.
yeah. So it could be it could be that. It's also, of course, interesting that he's. I mean, of course, he's aware of Egyptian rites, and and Egyptians would mummify until very late, right? It was just something that you did. So that's why we have like these also Hellenistic portraits. I mean, they're centuries before Proclus, but don't really know what the situation of like mummification was in his period. But still, you have these. They had this, and it would be interesting to know what he thought. And yes, maybe Plutarch has some observations on that. But um, in any case. I mean, yeah, you could say, well, that's thing, but I don't know. That would be like, eh, I don't know. It's like you go to, it's not even that you go to a museum and you see like a painting of Caravaggio to commune with Caravaggio because like it's not even a painting, right? It's like here is the broken here is the broken brush of Caravaggio. Um, it's I mean, maybe you could construct a theory like that. I'm not sure. Um, but yeah, could be. Why don't you continue reading?
I mean, like, and one more thing, like Aristotle and has this like funny chapter in the first book of the Ethics, where it's like questions if the happiness of your descendants and ancestors it also contributes to happiness, which would sort of ruin his like way of thinking. So he like tries to limit it and say something
Yeah,
like it
like
can must
each,
be a limit to it, and he's like maybe a little bit, and I'm not sure what's going on there, but
yeah, from what I understand of that thing, it's like his solution is like, well, each generation is further away, so it's less important. And but certainly if you have bad children, you can't say that you were, a happy person. Um, and um, bad grandchildren, who knows, maybe. But so I guess yeah, so I think that has to do with it, and also this emphasis that you were due that, he did the libations for the previous philosophers for him too. And that and so I guess there's like an expectation also that the philosophers after him, the Platonists after him also did those for him.
okay.
Okay.
Um, for where are
As,
we?
as
As
has
has
been
been
said.
said, his body was dressed according to his own precept and borne by his companions, was interned in the eastern suburbs of the city by Lysibetus, um, somewhere in Athens, it says, where the
Yeah.
body of his mentor Syrianus also lies. For this is what Syrianus enjoined upon him while still alive, and for that reason he had the depository of the tomb made double, so there was room for Proclus.
Yeah.
There were times after his death when Proclus in his outstanding piety was concerned that this might be improper after Syrianus' death, right? Then he seemed to see the same dream threatening him simply on account of this one thought. Mhm. And the tomb was inscribed the following four-line epigram, which he himself wrote for himself. That's a good idea. Everyone should write their own. Proclus I was, by a race, a man of Lycia, whom Syrianus fostered here to become the successor to his own school. This is the common tomb which received the bodies of both men. Oh, may a single place be a portion of both their souls.
Right. We're actually very fortunate that we've found I don't know if we have a register of this somewhere else, or if we actually found, I think we found the piece of the tomb of Syrianus, and it has another set of lines, and the two sets of lines go together. And what's interesting about this is that he expresses a desire to join him in heaven, in the pole. So like polos. So some people take this as being the North Star, the pole star, but the pole can also be used in Greek to mean heaven in general, all the sky. And it's interesting in light of the way I've decided to interpret the thing about him belonging to the Hermaic chain is that he takes Syrianus also to belong to the Hermaic chain. They both belong to Mercury. So they both wanted to meet again in Mercury. And it's interesting
Yeah.
that they are buried together. So first of all, we've seen that they lived together, and that this was a pattern of Proclus, that he would live with his his tutors. Proclus also thinks um, that the relationship of student to tutor is like that of human being to daimon, right? Alcibiades and Socrates is the paradigm example. And also, I think that there might be something like, hmm, I think I need to collect more texts to show this, but I think that the the ideal of like so Proclus in some sense accepts also the Aristophanes myth. He mentions the Aristophanes myth from the banquet in from the symposium in the Timaeus commentary when he's talking about the astral body. He's saying it's spherical, like it says in the Aristophanes myth, spherical. And but of course there's that whole thing that the spherical body of there is of two people. And in the Aristophanes myth, it's mentioned like, wouldn't you like to, if Hephaestus showed up and offered to bind you two and make you one person, and that you would be together, and they would be together all the way till you died. That's there too, and here they're being buried together. So I think there might be like some kind of interpretation here of them, joined together and fulfilling their true nature, their original human nature up there.
Hmm.
I think that might be partially behind this, and they're both, in some sense, belong to Mercury. And this would be interesting because it would mean that they were not. I mean, it's interesting then, especially that Proclus learns of that he belongs to the planet Mercury and that he was the same soul as the philosopher Nicomachus because and that he learns that in a vision or dream is that all happens after Syrianus dies. So um it could be that there's so like this isn't something that Syrianus himself taught, taught him or explained to him. It seems also that reflecting that a lot of these dreams he has like a lot of dreams with Syrianus, right? You also saw him like commanding him to write or not to write something, right? He not to write about the Chaldean oracles. And um so or no, not to write about the Orphic Rhapsodies. Um and he had those things about the afterlife, and now here he often had uh dreams where he felt guilty about being buried together with Syrianus. So yeah, it seems like there was a lot of concern about that. Um, again, so something about the perfect person, thinking about their death and their life after death is something that they do a lot of.
Hmm. Okay, 37. Before the
Mhm.
year of his death, they were portent such an eclipse of the sun, so conspicuous it became night by day, for a deep darkness descended and the stars appeared. Um, okay. This took place in Capricorn on its eastern center. The observers of days have also noted another to occur after the completion of the first year. So saying there will be another eclipse.
There will be another eclipse, right? Yeah.
Um, when commotions such as this are seen to occur in heaven, they are said to be significant. They're said to be significant of occurrences on Earth, and we take them as part of the preparation, as it were, the eclipse of the light of philosophy.
Right. So this eclipse is important for us to pinpoint the year of his death and also uh, its date, but and yeah, but we know that Proclus wrote a text on eclipses, but it shows up in a catalog, but it didn't come to us. But yeah, that these and this just general astrological principle that eclipses indicate big changes here, and especially since it's a solar eclipse, it has to do with the eclipsing of light. So like from some of the oldest astrological interpretations that we have, like from Mesopotamia, is it's eclipse of the sun, the king dies, right? And
Hmm.
Marinus is doing something similar here, um, about that. Um, yeah. Okay. So now you can just finish
Okay.
it.
So that's the okay, that was just a sign. So now 38, now let this narrative of mine suffice concerning the philosopher. Anyone who wishes may also write the truth about the companions who associated with him. For he had many visitors from many parts, some coming simply to hear him, while others were disciples and studied with him for the sake of philosophy. So there's like people who are just like tourists or whatever, just hearing
Right.
means.
Yeah, people hear about, oh, Proclus, the great philosopher, lives in Athens. Yeah, they go meet, visit. Yeah.
As for his
Mhm.
writings, let a more industrious person enumerate their titles. He doesn't even want to give a list. It's too long or something.
Yeah.
Um, while I have been led to write there, what I have been led to write here is for the sake of my own conscience and in order to pay my devoirs to his divine soul and the good diamond to which he was allotted.
Right. This parallels um, Porphyry, and yeah, it's interesting that it's both to the soul and to the daimon, right? So that's
Okay.
curious.
Of his writings,
That
I will only
matches
say
that
this. Yeah.
matches that matches the idea that the narrative is about the daimon, right?
Mhm.
So it's to tell someone's life is not only to pay your debts to that person, but also to the daimon who gave that life, who wrote that narrative.
Okay. Of his writings, okay. Of his writings, I will only say only this, that he always preferred his commentary on the Timaeus to all the rest, though he was very pleased with that on the Theaetetus. Interesting.
Right.
Mhm.
The commentary on the Theaetetus shows up in Arabic catalogs, but the actual text is not surfaced.
What's so great about the Timaeus one? We don't know for some reason. I
Well,
liked it.
I mean, it was certainly huge. And but it seems like every text he wrote was huge.
Hmm.
The it gives us a lot more background into the previous opinions than, for instance, the Parmenides one. It gives more of the previous opinions. This is in part because he's
Hmm.
working with Porphyry, and Porphyry had already done a lot of this. And um, but it also might be that it's a much more, it's much more wide ranging, I think, because although it's, the culmination of just physics and not of all theology, it's since it talks about the living being itself and the symbol and things like that, there are some pretty high level causes there as well. So you might think that the commentary on the Timaeus is more interesting. Also, he might prefer it because there's a lot of mathematics in the Timaeus, right? Which doesn't show up in the Parmenides, and that as a mathematician, he might prefer that. So, be something.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. It was a frequent habit of his to say this also. If I had the power of all the books of the ancients, I would have only the oracles and the Timaeus survive. And all the rest I would conceal from those men of the present, since they have caused harm to some of those who approach them in a casual and uncritical manner.
Right. That is curious thing that many people mention this, um, that he had this idea. Um, so it seems that like the Timaeus, and it's interesting that he said the Timaeus and not the Parmenides. Of course, there's an advantage of the Timaeus over the Parmenides, which is um, the Timaeus was, generally recognized. It's about physics. It's about, theology. People have different interpretations of it, but that it's about, that's proper contemplative philosophy is clear. Whereas about the Parmenides, it's unclear, right? Many people think that it's just a school exercise, right? That it's just logical or gymnastic or exercise, something like that. So that might be a reason to prefer the Timaeus, the Parmenides. But now, why the Timaeus to say the Republic? Unclear as well. Um, Unclear also if there is like a Christian background to this, um, and like exactly who does he think that there are problematic passages? One reason maybe not to take the Republic is because of the criticism of myth there, right? Which he had to defend the myths from in Essay 6. So it could be that the um it could be that that's something that made him consider, and also like the Republic. There's the whole problem of like, is it actually a political program? Is it not? Things like that. So that might be something that might lead people astray in reading the Republic. But yeah, it's interesting that he chooses that, and then why the oracles? Yeah, that's also unclear. Although it does seem that like the oracles came with this idea of ritual practice, right? Theurgy, that they developed, and this became for Neoplatonists, starting with Iamblichus, a general idea of how to think about any ritual. So any religious practice. So part of the idea of keeping the oracles is that you like you with the oracles, it's not just, for instance, Hecate that you can worship properly. Like this gives you a blueprint for worshiping any god, right? And so maybe like the oracles are there to represent all of theurgy and Timaeus all of philosophy, something like that.
And the problem with all the other books is that
Well, he says that they can be misinterpreted in one way or another, but that would and and so it's interesting that that's like also true for like Homer, right, or Hesiod. Um, and I guess the criticisms that they suffered from the other from Plato and other philosophers show that they can be misunderstood in that way. And I guess all other philosophy is not Plato. So Plato's everything's in Plato. Um, yeah, picking exactly why the Timaeus and why the Timaeus should be. I think also like Timaeus has a lot of epistemology in it, right? So the stuff about it being eikos mythos, right? It tells you. I mean, of course, we have to interpret this, but it does try to tell you how to read the text itself. It tells you this is a
Mhm,
likely story, but that it's in between opinion and noesis, and so that might be part of the advantage of the Timaeus that it somehow interprets itself for you as well.
mhm.
And and so like because there are debates about also like for instance is the Atlantis myth true or not? And yet there's but there's material in the very Timaeus to discuss that.
But
Um,
something like all the other books of Plato are not good, like are actively causing people to make mistakes.
yeah, although he doesn't says that he's going to destroy the others, but it's just that he would conceal them. So like, and then at a
Hmm.
later time they can study these things. Um, and yeah, I guess that's uh that's the implication that the other books of Plato, like without a proper tutor, they're making people make mistakes. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so that's that's a thing. So next class we will get back to more argumentative texts. We're gonna look first at Hermias, right? So Hermias, he's He was active in Alexandria, but he studied in Athens. And he studied together with Proclus as students of Syrianus. And he has a commentary on the Phaedrus, which is actually like his notes from Syrianus's course. There's even one moment that Proclus intervenes and he says, "My colleague Proclus said that." And what's interesting for us is to see what he says about the four levels of mania, of madness, and where theurgy goes into that, because that kind of mirrors the scale of virtues. And we'll see this, and Michael Griffin has a good article about this. So we'll discuss and read those texts, right? Michael Griffin and Dirk Baltzley. Uh, yeah, they co-authored a recent translation of the text, so it's in English. Um, and uh, let me know if you need a PDF. And
Yeah, if you have
the
one, I'll find it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you, and so we'll continue next class. And again, we'll be jumping back to Platonic background again. I might be working with slides again. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Um, is uh is the ninth good for you?
Could be, I think.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Good. Then I mean we still have time, but
Okay.
if not, that's it. Man.
Yeah, I don't see much
Okay.
what's going on,
Great.
so we could just okay.
Okay. Then we'll just make this one shorter.
I'll see you.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, it's fine. All right.